The conference room was silent except for the sound of pens scratching against paper. 23 signatures stood between Apex Enterprise Systems and the biggest contract in our company history, $900 million. The air smelled of expensive cologne and leather portfolios. All eyes were on the mahogany table where the final document sat. That was when Gregory Preston cleared his throat. "Before we proceed," he announced, his voice cutting through the tension, "I want to address an operational restructuring that will take effect immediately." My stomach dropped. Something in his tone felt wrong. He turned to me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "David, your services are no longer required. You have been dead weight for months, and quite frankly, we need actual talent to execute contracts of this magnitude. Security will escort you out." The room froze. Someone gasped. I felt 23 pairs of eyes shift to me. But I did not panic. I did not cry. I smiled because Gregory Preston had just made the most expensive mistake of his career, and he had absolutely no idea. My name is David Vance, and until that moment, I had been the Vice President of Infrastructure Operations at Apex Enterprise Systems for 8 years. The title sounded fancy, but my background was anything but glamorous. I grew up in a neighborhood where people fixed their own cars because mechanics were a luxury. My father, John Vance, worked double shifts at a manufacturing plant. My mother, Martha Vance, cleaned houses during the day and took online courses at night to finish her degree. They taught me two things: work solves problems, and understanding people matters more than impressing them. When I started at Apex, I was not interested in climbing ladders or playing politics. I wanted to build systems that worked, really worked. The kind of infrastructure that did not just function, but anticipated problems before they became disasters. That philosophy made me strange in the corporate world. While others were optimizing their LinkedIn profiles and networking at golf courses, I was in server rooms understanding every cable, every protocol, and every single point of potential failure. My team was not the flashiest department. We did not generate revenue directly. We were the people who kept the lights on, the data flowing, and the promises deliverable. That made us invisible to people like Gregory Preston. Gregory joined Apex as Chief Executive Officer 14 months before that conference room humiliation. He came from a competitor, brought in by our board to scale the company and unlock enterprise value. In corporate speak, that meant making rich people richer. From day one, his style clashed with the culture we had built. We valued substance. He valued spectacle. We solved problems quietly. He wanted announcements and press releases. Within his first 90 days, he had replaced 4 department heads with people from his former company. All of them had impressive resumes and zero understanding of how Apex actually operated. I watched good people get pushed out. Talented engineers who had built our systems from the ground up were suddenly not aligned with the vision. The new leadership spoke in buzzwords and held meetings about meetings, but they left my department mostly alone, probably because infrastructure was not glamorous enough to matter to them. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was not reading the contracts they inherited when they arrived. 3 years before Gregory's arrival, Apex faced a critical problem. We had landed our first major government contract, a data management system for federal agencies. The requirements were intense: 99.99% uptime, military-grade security, and complete data sovereignty. Building that infrastructure through traditional corporate channels would have taken 18 months and cost $7 million we did not have. Our then Chief Executive Officer, Robert Harrington, was desperate. The contract had penalty clauses that would bankrupt us if we failed to deliver on time. I came to Robert with an unconventional proposal. I would personally finance and build the server infrastructure through my own LLC, Vance Infrastructure Holdings. Apex would lease the capacity from me at cost. No profit margin, just operational expenses. In exchange, I would retain ownership of the physical infrastructure, and the lease agreement would include ironclad terms protecting both parties. Robert was hesitant. It was unusual, possibly unprecedented, but the alternative was losing everything. We brought in lawyers. They drafted a contract that was airtight. Apex got exclusive access to infrastructure that met every specification. I got ownership control and a lease agreement that could only be terminated under specific conditions, none of which included the CEO not liking you. To make this happen, I spent my savings and took out loans. I bought servers, negotiated with data center facilities, and personally configured security protocols. I worked 70-hour weeks for months. The system launched 2 weeks early. The government contract was not just successful, it was flawless. Zero downtime in 3 years, zero security breaches, and zero complaints. That infrastructure became the foundation for everything Apex built afterward. Every major client we acquired ran on systems connected to that original framework. When we scaled on infrastructure I owned. But here is the thing about being good at your job in a quiet way. People forget you exist. The sales team took credit for client satisfaction. The executives took credit for strategic vision. My department kept everything running so smoothly that people assumed it ran itself. By the time Gregory arrived, most people had forgotten that the servers powering 70% of our operations were not actually owned by Apex. The documentation existed, and the contracts were filed. Any competent executive doing proper due diligence would have found them. But Gregory was not interested in due diligence. He was interested in making moves that looked decisive. The $900 million contract was Sinclair Global, a manufacturing conglomerate, expanding their digital infrastructure. They needed a partner who could handle massive data operations across 14 countries. Gregory saw it as his legacy deal, the crown jewel that would define his tenure and probably launch him toward an even bigger chief executive officer position somewhere else. The entire company spent 6 months preparing the pitch. My team worked backbreaking hours, ensuring our infrastructure could handle Sinclair's requirements. I personally designed the scalability models. We demonstrated capacity that our competitors could not match. When Sinclair Global chose us, Gregory took a victory lap, press releases, all-hands meetings. He was already spending the money in his head. But something shifted in those final weeks before signing. His new chief operating officer, a man named Bradley Thorne, who had followed Gregory from his previous company, started asking questions about operational efficiency and redundant personnel costs. I heard through back channels that Bradley had convinced Gregory that my department was overstaffed and overpaid, that we were a relic of the company's unfocused past. The morning of the signing, I arrived at headquarters at 6 o'clock in the morning. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon, but I wanted to run final diagnostics. Sinclair's team would be monitoring system performance as part of their due diligence process. Everything needed to be perfect. My team had delivered perfection. By noon, I had confirmed that every server was operating optimally. Data transfer rates exceeded specifications. Security protocols were active and updated. We were ready to support the largest contract in company history. I changed into the suit I had brought for the ceremony. The signing would take place in the executive conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the one they used for photographic opportunities and board meetings. I was not naive. I knew Gregory did not respect my work, but I had delivered everything he had requested. The contract was happening because my infrastructure made it possible. I thought professional results meant job security. That was how much I still had to learn about people like Gregory Preston. The conference room filled with executives, lawyers, and Sinclair's leadership team. Their chief executive officer, Evelyn Sinclair, was a woman in her 60s with a reputation for thorough preparation and zero tolerance for incompetence. The mood was celebratory but formal. Assistants arranged documents, and lawyers whispered final confirmations. Someone had brought in catering, small sandwiches, and sparkling water in glass bottles. I stood near the back, not because I was hiding, but because that was where technical people usually stood during executive ceremonies, close enough to address questions, far enough to stay out of photos. Gregory worked the room like a politician, shaking hands and laughing too loudly at jokes that were not funny. Bradley stood beside him, nodding along, playing the role of supportive number 2. Then the documents were ready. Evelyn Sinclair sat down. Gregory sat opposite to Evelyn Sinclair. The lawyers positioned papers between them. That was when Gregory decided to make his move. "Before we proceed," Gregory said, standing back up, I want to address an operational restructuring that will take effect immediately." The shift in the room was instant. Evelyn Sinclair's expression went neutral. Her lawyers looked up from their documents. Gregory turned to me. "David, your services are no longer required. You have been dead weight for months, and quite frankly, we need actual talent to execute contracts of this magnitude. Security will escort you out." The words hit like a physical force. Someone near me inhaled sharply. I saw Evelyn Sinclair's eyes narrow, but Gregory was smiling, proud of himself. Two security guards appeared at the door. They looked uncomfortable. One of them, Samuel, had worked with me on access protocols for the building. He would not meet my eyes. Every instinct screamed to fight back, to defend myself, to explain to everyone in that room how catastrophically stupid this decision was. But I did not. I smiled. Not a smirk, not a bitter grimace, a genuine smile, because in that moment I realized something beautiful. Gregory had no idea what he had just done. I walked toward the door. The security guards fell into step beside me, not touching, just present and professional. As I passed Evelyn Sinclair, she caught my eye. There was a question in her expression, but she stayed silent. At the doorway, I stopped and turned back. "Gregory," I said calmly, "you should check the infrastructure contracts, specifically the lease agreements for the primary server network." Gregory waved dismissively. "Your replacement will handle any transition issues. There is no replacement, and there will not be a transition." Bradley stepped forward. "Is that a threat?" "It is not a threat. It is a fact. You will understand in about 48 hours." Then I left. Behind me, I heard confused murmuring, but Gregory's voice cut through it. "He is just bitter." Let us proceed. I walked through the corridor past my department, where my team was watching through the glass walls, their faces stricken. I gave them a small nod. They knew what was coming. I had briefed my senior engineers that morning, just in case. They had already backed up their personal files. The lease agreement I had signed with Apex Enterprise Systems 3 years earlier was very specific. It guaranteed the company exclusive access to my infrastructure as long as I remained employed in a decision-making technical role, or if my departure was voluntary and followed a 90-day transition period. Termination without cause, especially public termination, triggered a different clause. I had the right to revoke access with 72 hours' notice. The servers did not belong to Apex. The data centers did not belong to Apex. The security protocols, the redundancy systems, the backup frameworks, and the custom server routing software, all of it was mine legally, contractually, and completely. In fact, under Section 106 of Title 17 of the United States Code, I held the exclusive copyright to the proprietary server management software that ran the entire hardware stack. I had developed it before joining Apex, and the lease only granted them a non-transferable license tied to my active employment. When I got to my car, I called my lawyer, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, who specialized in corporate contract law. She had helped draft the original agreement. When I told her what happened, she laughed in disbelief. "Gregory Preston fired you during the Sinclair signing in front of everyone?" "Yes, he did." "David, you know what this means." "I do. I need you to file the revocation notice. The 72-hour clock starts now. They are going to panic." "They certainly will," Sarah said. "I will send the official documents to their legal department immediately." I went home. My apartment was quiet. I made coffee and sat by the window watching the city below. My phone started buzzing around 6 o'clock in the evening. Calls from coworkers, texts asking what happened, and messages from people who had heard rumors. I did not answer. There was nothing to say yet. The real chaos would start tomorrow, when Gregory and Bradley actually tried to understand the systems they had just inherited and realized those systems were not theirs to inherit. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, I got a text from one of my senior engineers, Sanjay Patel, who had been with the company for 6 years. Sanjay wrote that Gregory and Bradley were asking the team to explain the infrastructure documentation. They could not find anything that showed Apex owned the physical servers. Bradley was screaming at the administrators. I replied to Sanjay, telling him they would not find anything because it did not exist. I advised him to call me if they asked him to do anything illegal or unethical. Sanjay asked if I was okay, and I told him I was fine, better than fine, and I was. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt clear. The political games, the undervaluation, the slow erosion of respect, it was all over. Not because I had quit, but because someone had finally pushed hard enough to activate consequences they could not imagine. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls. Most were from Apex numbers I did not recognize. One was from Gregory's assistant. I ignored them and went for a run. When I got back, there was an email from Bradley Thorne. The subject line was Urgent Infrastructure Documentation Request. The email was 3 paragraphs of corporate speak that boiled down to asking me to explain where the servers were and how to access the ownership records because they could not find anything showing the equipment belonged to Apex. I replied with a single sentence. Please direct all inquiries to my attorney, Sarah Jenkins, followed by her contact information. Then I forwarded the entire thread to Sarah with a note. It begins, she called me 10 minutes later, laughing. David, they have no idea. They actually think this is a documentation problem. How long until they realize? My guess is the end of business today, I said. Someone in their legal department will eventually read the contracts, and then all hell will break loose. What should I expect? Threats, offers, desperation. Hold your ground. You have all the leverage here, Sarah was right. At 4:47 in the afternoon, I received a call from a number I did not recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Robert Harrington, the former chief executive officer, who had approved my original infrastructure deal. David, he said, his voice tired. The board called me. They are trying to understand what happened. I told them the truth, that you built and owned the infrastructure, that the lease agreement was legitimate and approved by the board, and that anyone doing proper due diligence would have known this. Did they listen? They panicked. Gregory is claiming he was never informed. The board is claiming they assumed ownership transferred at some point. Everyone is pointing fingers. What do you need from me, Robert? He sighed. Nothing. I am not calling to ask for favors. I am calling to say I am sorry. You deserve better than what Gregory did. You built something remarkable, and you did it with integrity. Whatever happens next, you have earned the right to make that choice. It was the first genuine apology I had received. It mattered. Thank you, Robert, I said. For what it is worth, Evelyn Sinclair pulled Sinclair Global out of the contract this afternoon. My heart skipped. She did? Yes. She said if Apex Enterprise Systems treats essential personnel that way in public, she does not trust their operational stability. The way Gregory fired you during the signing spooked the client. Then, when the infrastructure questions started circulating, she walked. $900 million is gone. Not because of you, but because of Gregory's ego and incompetence. How is Gregory handling it? Robert laughed bitterly. Not well. The board has called an emergency meeting. Bradley is trying to blame your department for poor documentation. Gregory is trying to claim you sabotaged the company. I did not sabotage anything, I said. I built systems that worked and I own them legally. I know, and the board knows too now. But knowing does not solve their problem. We talked for a few more minutes. Robert had left the company 6 months after Gregory arrived, forced out during the leadership purge. He had landed on his feet with consulting work and advisory boards. Before we hung up, he said, whatever you decide to do with the infrastructure, make sure it is your decision, not revenge, not reaction, your decision. It was good advice. The 72-hour notice period ticked down. I spent the time thinking, planning, and fielding increasingly frantic communications through Sarah. Gregory sent a formal letter claiming my lease agreement was invalid due to conflicts of interest, a legal argument that fell apart immediately since the board had approved everything years ago. Bradley tried a different approach, sending a proposal to buy out my infrastructure at what he called fair market value, a number that was about 40% of what it would cost them to rebuild everything from scratch. The board sent their own lawyers, who at least understood the situation. They requested a meeting to discuss options. I agreed to meet on day 4, after the revocation period ended and their access to my infrastructure officially terminated. That night at midnight, the lease expired. At 1 minute past midnight, my servers began refusing Apex Enterprise Systems access requests. I was not destroying anything, and I was not deleting data. I was simply enforcing the contract terms. No employment in a technical decision-making role meant no lease agreement. which meant no access. Their systems did not crash immediately. They had some local capacity and some backup systems that were not running through my infrastructure, but about 70% of their operations depended on my servers. By early morning, clients were reporting outages. The panic was complete. The meeting took place at a neutral location, a conference room in Sarah's law firm. Apex sent 3 board members, their general counsel, and surprisingly, Gregory Preston himself. Gregory looked like he had not slept in days. The board members were professionals, a venture capitalist named Winston Douglas, a former tech executive named Patricia Mercer, and a finance expert named Raymond Gentry. They were serious people who understood they were in serious trouble. Winston Douglas spoke first. "David, we appreciate you taking this meeting. We would like to find a resolution that works for everyone." "I am listening," I said. Patricia Mercer leaned forward. "First, we want to acknowledge that your termination was handled inappropriately. Gregory has admitted that he did not review the infrastructure contracts before making that decision." I glanced at Gregory. He was staring at the table, his jaw tight. "The board is prepared to offer reinstatement at your previous position with a formal apology and compensation for the disruption." Raymond Gentry said, "Sarah and I had anticipated this." "And the infrastructure access?" I asked. "We would like to reinstate the lease under the original terms," Raymond said. "No," I replied simply. The room went quiet. "No?" Winston repeated. "The original lease was structured the way it was because Apex needed help and had limited resources. That is not the situation anymore. If we are renegotiating, we are doing it properly." Patricia Mercer nodded slowly. "What are your terms?" I slid a folder across the table. Sarah and I had spent 2 days preparing this document. Option 1. Apex purchases the infrastructure outright at independently appraised fair market value. I transition everything over 90 days and walk away. "And option 2? Raymond asked. "I return as Chief Technology Officer, not Vice President of Infrastructure. I want full executive authority over all technical operations and an equity package standard for chief-level positions. The infrastructure lease continues, but at market rates, not at cost. I maintain physical ownership." Gregory finally spoke, his voice trembling. "That is insane. You are extorting the company." Sarah's voice was like ice. "Mr. Preston, extortion implies illegal coercion. Mr. Vance owns infrastructure that your company depends on. Under Section 106 of Title 17 of the United States Code, he also holds the exclusive copyright to the routing software. He is under no obligation to provide access to his intellectual property or hardware at any price. These are generous offers considering your position. Under corporate governance standards, your failure to conduct due diligence before terminating him is a clear breach of fiduciary duty, which we are prepared to raise with shareholders if necessary." Winston Douglas held up a hand. "Gregory, you are here as a courtesy." "Stay quiet," the rebuke was public and sharp. Gregory's face flushed, but he shut up. Patricia studied the documents. "These terms are aggressive." "They are fair," I countered. "Option 1 gives you complete ownership and eliminates any dependency on me. Option 2 gives you access to infrastructure you cannot replicate quickly while ensuring I am properly valued. If you refuse both, I will sell my infrastructure to someone else, and you can rebuild from scratch. Based on my estimates, that will take you 18 months and cost significantly more than either option I have presented." Raymond Gentry was running numbers on his laptop. "He is right," he said, looking at the other board members. "A conservative estimate for rebuilding comparable infrastructure is between $12 and $15 million. And that is if we do not lose more clients during the transition. We have already lost Sinclair Global, and 3 other clients have reached out asking about operational stability. If word spreads that we do not actually own our core infrastructure, we will lose more." The board members exchanged looks. They were doing mental math, weighing options and calculating damage. Finally, Patricia spoke. "We need to discuss this privately. Can we reconvene tomorrow?" "Take the time you need," I said. "But every day without access is a day your clients are asking questions." We left the conference room. In the elevator, Sarah grinned. "You were perfect. Professional, firm, and unshakable." I was terrified, I admitted. It did not show. "They are going to take option 2, you know." "You think so?" Option 1 costs them immediate capital they do not have, and they lose your expertise. Option 2 keeps you engaged, maintains infrastructure access, and only costs them operational expenses plus your new compensation. It is the smart play. She was right. That evening, Winston Douglas called me directly. The board voted to accept option 2 with a few minor modifications to the equity structure. Can my attorney review the amendments? I asked, keeping my voice neutral, even though my heart was racing. Yes, Winston said. And David, for what it is worth, we should have been paying attention. What happened in that conference room never should have occurred. We failed you as a board. It was accountability, real and direct. I appreciate that, I said. One more thing, Winston added. The board is moving to remove Gregory Preston as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. Bradley Thorne will be departing as well. We would like to announce your appointment as Chief Technology Officer at the same time to signal stability to clients. Understood. The announcement went out 3 days later. Apex Enterprise Systems released a statement. Effective immediately, Gregory Preston has stepped down as Chief Executive Officer. David Vance has been appointed Chief Technology Officer, joining the executive leadership team. Mr. Vance brings 8 years of infrastructure excellence and deep institutional knowledge to this role. Apex remains committed to operational excellence and client service. The corporate speak hit a messier reality, but the message was clear. The people who had created the crisis were gone, and someone competent was in charge of the most critical systems. My phone exploded with messages from former colleagues congratulating me, clients reaching out to confirm stability, and recruiters suddenly interested in my career trajectory. I also received a message from Evelyn Sinclair's office. She wanted to discuss reinstating the Sinclair Global contract under revised terms. I forwarded it to the interim chief executive officer with a note asking if I should take the meeting. His response came in seconds. Yes, the next 6 months were intense. As chief technology officer, I rebuilt the technical leadership team, bringing in people who understood that infrastructure was not just about keeping the lights on. It was about enabling everything else the company did. I renegotiated the Sinclair contract personally, working with Evelyn Sinclair to address her concerns about operational stability. We landed a revised deal worth $750 million, smaller than the original, but still the largest contract in company history. Gregory Preston disappeared from the tech industry headlines. Last I heard, he had taken a senior advisor role at a private equity firm, which is corporate purgatory for failed executives. Bradley Thorne tried to claim on social media that he had successfully transitioned Apex to new leadership, a creative interpretation of being fired. Someone from the company reported the post, and he quietly deleted it. My infrastructure company, Vance Infrastructure Holdings, grew as Apex grew. The lease payments at market rates provided steady revenue. I hired a small team to manage the technical operations, ensuring I was not a single point of failure. And I made sure every contract, every agreement, and every operational detail was documented immaculately. Never again would someone dismiss me as dead weight without understanding exactly what they were leasing. There is a moment that stays with me from that whole experience. It happened about a month after I became Chief Technology Officer. I was walking through the office past the same conference room where Gregory had fired me. They had renovated it. New furniture, new paint, as if changing the decor could erase what happened there. One of the newer employees, someone who joined during the chaos and did not know the full story, stopped me. "Mr. Vance, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "People say you saved the company, that it almost fell apart before you stepped in." "I did not save anything," I said. "I just made sure people understood what things actually cost." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" "There is a difference between what something is worth and what people think it is worth. Infrastructure, people, and expertise, they are invisible until they are gone. Then suddenly everyone realizes the price." She nodded thoughtfully and walked away. That was the core meaning of the experience. It was about making invisible work visible and making sure the people who did that work were not disposable. A year after the conference room incident, Apex held its annual leadership summit. We had recovered financially, client retention was strong, and the Sinclair contract was performing ahead of projections. Winston Douglas, who had decided to stay on as chief executive officer permanently, gave the opening address. He talked about resilience, adaptation, and learning from failures. Then he did something unexpected. He asked me to speak. I had not prepared anything. I walked to the front of the room, looking at about 200 people, employees from every department, and tried to figure out what to say. A year ago, I started by saying, this company almost imploded, not because of market conditions or competition, but because we forgot what actually mattered. We forgot that systems are built by people, that trust is earned through consistency, and that you cannot fake expertise with charisma. The room was silent. We survived because enough people cared about doing the work right, even when it was not appreciated. The engineers who maintained systems nobody noticed, the support staff who solved problems quietly, the people who showed up every day and did their jobs with integrity. I saw heads nodding. That is still what matters. Not headlines, not ego, just competent people solving real problems. If we remember that, we will be fine. The applause was genuine, not polite corporate clapping, but real appreciation. After the summit, Evelyn Sinclair approached me. We had developed a good working relationship over the months, built on mutual respect and direct communication. That was a good speech, she said. It was unrehearsed, I replied. The best ones are, she paused. Sinclair is expanding our infrastructure needs. We are looking at additional capacity in Asian and European markets. Apex can handle that. I know, but I am not asking Apex. I am asking you, your infrastructure company. We want to work directly with you on the build-out, then lease capacity back to Apex and other partners. It was a significant offer, a chance to expand my business beyond just supporting Apex. I would need to check conflict of interest policies, I said carefully. Already did, she smiled. As long as you are transparent and Apex gets priority access at the agreed rates, there is no issue. Winston approved it. We shook hands. Send me the specifications. I will put together a proposal. That conversation opened doors I had not anticipated. Over the next year, Vance Infrastructure Holdings grew from a single-purpose entity into a legitimate business serving multiple clients across industries. Apex remained my largest customer, but not my only one. The work I had started as a desperate solution to a funding problem had become something bigger, proof that technical expertise, properly valued and legally protected, could build real equity. 2 years after the firing, I received an unexpected email. Gregory Preston wanted to meet for coffee. My first instinct was to delete it, but curiosity won. We met at a neutral cafe, the kind where startup founders and freelancers worked on laptops. He looked older and less polished than the executive who had dismissed me in front of a room full of people. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I am curious why you wanted to meet." He stirred his coffee, not making eye contact. I wanted to apologize properly, not through lawyers or public relations statements. Okay. I was arrogant. I thought leadership meant making bold moves, cutting inefficiencies, and projecting confidence. I did not understand the systems I was managing, and I did not value the people who actually made things work. It was the most honest I had ever heard him speak. "What happened after you left Apex?" I asked. I consulted for a while, realized I did not know as much as I thought I did, and started actually learning how businesses operate instead of just performing leadership. Now I am a chief operating officer at a mid-sized firm. Smaller role, less ego, more learning. It is better. We talked for another hour. We were not friends, but we were not enemies either. Just two people who had been on opposite sides of a disaster, both changed by it. Today, 5 years after that conference room confrontation, Apex Enterprise Systems is stable and growing. Vance Infrastructure Holdings employs 15 people and supports clients across 3 continents. I am still Chief Technology Officer at Apex, but my equity in my infrastructure business mean I am financially independent. The lesson I learned was not about revenge or vindication. It was simpler and more practical. Understand what you are worth, document it properly, and never assume other people will value your work just because it is essential. Invisible work stays invisible until you make it visible through contracts, through ownership, and through standing firm when people try to dismiss you. Gregory taught me that lesson, though he had not intended to do so. The conference room where he fired me is now used for new employee orientations. Sometimes I walk past it and remember the moment everything changed, not with anger, but with clarity. That moment was terrifying and humiliating. It was also the moment I stopped waiting for validation and started demanding it. The servers still run, the systems still work, and now everyone knows exactly who built them and what they are worth. That is not revenge. That is just honest accounting. If this story resonated, if you have ever felt undervalued or dismissed for doing essential work quietly, there is a community here that understands. Subscribing means you will not miss the next one. Stories about people who played the long game, documented their worth, and made sure their work spoke louder than anyone's ego. The button is right there when you are ready.